the conservation issues, when you see them in the ground, they're emerging from an interplay of many different actors. You have the communities, they have certain livelihood needs, certain strategies towards natural resources. At the same time, you have the local government who is providing the management framework. You may have the national policy, then there may be private sector involved, either directly managing land, using it for agriculture or forestry, or buying products from that area. So you have all these different actors, so any strategy that's looking at conservation or sustainable management of natural resources has to act with these different actors. We work through civil society, but we don't expect them to act or to operate in isolation. Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund, or CEPF, is a multi-donor funding mechanism that was established in 2000, and it's been operating now for 15 years in more than 90 countries and territories around the world. It has a focus on the biodiversity hotspots and on engaging and strengthening civil society to protect biodiversity. So we're a grants-making fund. We have support from the European Union and 6 other global donors, and they collectively channel the resources into the fund, and then we make it available in the form of grants to civil society groups who are working on issues of biodiversity conservation in the hotspots. We use the CEPF grants as a catalytic way because we don't have a huge amount of resources. We can't do natural resource management at scale, but what CEPF can do is catalyse models, and maybe those models can be then taken up either into policy, into the practice of private sector, or into the ways that other funders are working. Our grants are intended to complement the funding that our donor partners already give, and most of that's in the form of bilateral assistance to government, typically to national government, often to subnational government as well. CEPF is intended to be complementary, and that's why it's available to civil society groups, but the reality, as I've mentioned, is conservation can't be achieved by one actor acting in isolation. It requires a collective partnership. So it's very important that any of our projects also look at how they're going to engage with local government and other stakeholders. We're proactive about finding alignment with other funding mechanisms. So we just talked about West Africa now, and there's a program that we're closely involved with that's funded through the US government, and they're doing a similar program across West Africa, looking at regional governments and national governments and subnational governments and their role in biodiversity conservation. So there's good complementarity, and we can look at how we may be able to co-finance initiatives. Maybe CEPF could support one component and this program could support another. We talked already with some of the groups here at the European Commission whether there's good alignment with other forms of European aid that is going into West Africa, and similar kinds of dialogues are happening in other parts of the world. It's really very important that we don't act as a donor in isolation. We have to have this dialogue. We can have it ourselves, or the CEPF regional implementation team can have it with the regional staff of those donor agencies in country, which is actually the most practical level at which to have these discussions.